What's up, everyone? Aaron Negler here for Cheesehead TV and your Packers Daily Chat. Wherever you are on the internet, we're here for you folks. We're dedicated to Packers fans worldwide. Hello to everyone chiming in already in the comments section. Good to see everybody in the live chat. Cool dudes, nice handle. Starts us off with your impression of Lafleur and the other coaches. Yes, Matt Lafleur met with the media today to talk about his new coaching staff, along with Mike Pettin and an assortment of other guys there at 1265 Lombardi. I thought Lafleur, obviously the big takeaway is he was much less nervous this time around than when he was introduced as head coach. I think that's not a surprise. Not a ton of information to be gleaned there, although I did find it interesting that he, basically put it out there point blank that his hiring of his offensive line coach stemmed from wanting to get, specific teaching to his scheme and concentrating on the running game. That's something that I think is going to be very important. The more you look at Lafleur's history, the offense he's coming out of, the offenses he's been exposed to throughout his career, I think, it's pretty apparent that zone run scheme is going to be the foundation of what they want to do while he's in Green Bay. Listen to the Patreon exclusives. They're great interviews. Thank you, Jake. For everybody who hasn't hopped on board yet, hope you'll consider giving us $5 a month at the Cheesehead TV Patreon. My podcast, Negler's Never Right, is up there exclusively. It's the only place you can get it. $5 a month. Supports everything we do, from those podcasts to all the videos we do, everything we do on the website. The draft guide coming up, obviously, is a big endeavor. And for as much as we make from people actually purchasing them, that doesn't even begin to cover all the expense. So anything you can do to help out, it's greatly appreciated. Thoughts on the relative youth of the coaching staff? Yeah, well, I thought Lafleur's interesting on that, was pretty interesting in the sense that, he point blank, first up said he thinks his staff is going to bring a lot of energy to the table. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he did say, something akin to, that energy being able to connect with the players. And I think that's an ongoing theme we've heard in and around the Packers, the organization, as far as the complacency that had set in across the organization, not just in the locker room. But I think that's a big point this offseason, is a reinvigorated franchise. And the coaching staff will be a big part of that because of their youth. Now, having energy is great. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get results from it, but it's certainly going to be interesting to watch play out, especially as some of the veterans in the locker room try and reset their dynamic with the coaching staff. How big a deterrent is Green Bay as a city to free agents, to my knowledge? Does the front office target only specific players because of this disadvantage? That's a really good question, Michael. It's a reality that the Packers definitely have to deal with, in the sense that if there's a young guy entering the prime of his career looking to hit, big money, but live a quote, big baller lifestyle, that's probably a bit of a deterrent, a bit of a detriment. But I do think the Packers try and hone in on guys who, are in it for football reasons. That's kind of been their philosophy through the draft, and I think that's similar when it comes to free agency. But at the end of the day, all of that said, it's about the money. Don't let anyone ever tell you differently. And if the Packers, need to pay a little bit more to get a guy in, because Green Bay is a small town, there's not a lot to do, etc., I don't think they're afraid to do it, and I think that will definitely seal the deal. There will be the occasional guy who has no interest in playing in a smaller market, and that's totally understandable. I do think the fan base outside of things probably makes more of that than is actually happening. You talk to agents, you talk to players, it's not a huge consideration, but it's definitely, if you're kind of got similar offers between two franchises and you prefer living in a city, then yeah, you're probably going to go take that money, then you can't begrudge a guy for that. I know the Packers for a long time, and Michael Cohen wrote about this pretty extensively when we worked together at PackersNews.com. In his 2 pieces on Russ Ball, he noted how much Russ and the Packers kind of used to play on the idea that, look, you can come play with Aaron Rodgers and you can have a shot at getting to a Super Bowl, and they would get, sometimes agents and players to consider taking a little bit less because of that advantage. Last 2 years, you got to think that's a little bit harder to make that pitch. So I think, you need every advantage you can get playing in a small market. And the Packers need to get back to their winning ways so that coming to Green Bay and living in the cold and, kind of shutting yourself off from nightlife, et cetera, doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. Because, the longer you go with losing seasons, the more you become the Siberia of the NFL in Green Bay. That's what it was in the 70s and 80s, and that is probably the worst possible thing that could happen to the Packers as free agency continues to grow as far as the salary cap, the revenue pie, et cetera. You don't want to give people excuses not to come to your town. I'm looking sharp these days. Thank you, Mark. Will the combine separate the pass rushers in this year's draft? It seems like there's no consensus on who's best after Nick Bosa. Hillary, I do believe that will start to kind of shake things out a little bit. I mean, I saw today Mel Kiper had Sweat in the top 5, I think. That really surprised me. I don't think he'll go that high, but you never know. But as far as a consensus ranking, I think because there are so many talented guys this year that I think you're going to see differences of opinion throughout the draft process. But I do think after we get some measurables, both with the combine and then throughout pro days, for those guys who participate in their pro days, I think you'll start to see things at least even out a little bit. Because right now you've got some wide swings as far as where we're seeing guys go in mock drafts. Again, mock drafts, they're fun to talk about and they're good entertainment, but they don't mean much, especially in mid to late February. Do you think Antonio Brown is a possibility with round 2 and a deal restructured, a $15 million to play with QB1? No. Would you consider extending Mike Daniels or let him play out his final year? Good question, Sam. It's interesting how he definitely did not look like the Mike Daniels we were used to the first part of the year. I thought he played well. He played solid football. I thought teams were really able to kind of take advantage of some of his aggressiveness. Last year, you saw teams targeting him with wham blocks and inviting him up the field with his quick first step, especially in the running game. All of that said, to your question, the fact that he's coming off an injury, I would think they'll probably let him play out at least the first part of the year, see how he rebounds, and then maybe approach him about an extension during the season. But that doesn't mean that they won't have talks. Well, I think we'll start hearing about guys with possible extensions once we get to the combine. That's when all the agents sit down with all the guys from the team. So we'll start to get news probably next Tuesday or Wednesday in that regard. Do I think I can beat Grossi in Madden? I don't know. I don't think it. I know it. Grossi's out there on Twitter trying to act all cool and tough. And, it just so happens he doesn't use the same system as I do. And of course, it's public knowledge which system I'm on. So he's talking all this junk before it's revealed that he's on a different system. So he knows there's no possibility of this thing ever occurring. But I will say this. Let me tell you right here live on air at 5, whatever it is, Eastern on Monday. Tom, I think I saw you here earlier in the chat. So if you're watching, and if you're watching later, that's fine. Catch up. I'm inviting you to the Cheesehead TV Live X studio for a live stream throwdown of Madden, you and me. And the winner gets bragging rights for a year until we do it again the following season. That's a whole year of you having to put up with my nonsense, talking about how much better at Madden than I am. How about that? Would you rather trade a first for OBJ or a third for AB? A first for OBJ, no doubt. What kind of impact will Clay's potential departure have on the Packers' defense going forward? David, I actually think pretty minimal. He was not productive his final season, even though he played 16 games. I think he's still an athlete, and he can still create some havoc. He's still, a guy you have to account for in some ways. But for the most part, I think you can probably upgrade through the draft and/or free agency, and his absence will be minimal. That's what I tend to think. Let's going on over on Twitter? See what's happening over here. Starting with, based off of getting an outside linebacker, free safety, and slot wide receiver in free agency, how much do you think the Packers will spend on free safety? Adrian Amos is a great fit, but word has it he wants $8 million plus a year. Worth it for a young safety, potentially hitting his prime? 3-year contract? Whew, there's a whole lot going on there. 3-year contract, good luck getting that through his agent. Maybe if he's, dead set on hitting the market again while he's relatively young or in his prime. $8 million plus a year does feel a little high, but cap going up basically $10 million every year. You sign him for that now, he's probably a bargain in 2 years, or not a bargain, but at least, it's not crazy. It's not too rich for the blood, so to speak. As far as what the Packers go for him, I would tend to doubt it. I think they'll let another team overpay there. But you never know. It helps weaken a division foe too, so I'm down with that. Green Bay last took an offensive player in the first round in 2011 with Derek Sherrod. Since drafting Rodgers, they've taken only 2 guys on offense in the first. One was Bulaga. Now people are on edge or bust train. Well, some people are. Where's the hope for fans of early offensive picks? Michael, I think there are plenty of people who would love to see them take a tight end in the first round with either one of those first round picks they have. I think clearly the way the defense has performed throughout the recent past is why so many people kind of opine for defensive players, and you see so many mocks, slotting in defensive players for the Packers. But look, you don't have to worry about any of that, and that's all narrative outside the building. But within the building, they're doing their work and they're putting together their tiers. And if a guy is there at 12 who plays on the offensive side of the ball, they're not going to dismiss it and say, well, we need a defensive player or we need edge or bust. That's not how pro teams work. If there is a guy available to them who is clearly head and shoulders above the rest, there's a good chance the Packers will take him if he's on offense or defense. Having 2 first-rounders this year, I want us to go best player available and then for need at 30. Just went through old drafts, and in 2013, we went for need, Dayton Jones, but the very next pick would have been the best available, DeAndre Hopkins. And there you go, Chase. I mean, at the time, you have to think, wide receiver wasn't probably perceived as a need, but DeAndre Hopkins sure would have helped. And Dayton Jones, I know people are down on Dayton. I think he's a better player than he was given credit for by fans. He was caught having to do a lot of different things. The Packers, asked him to do a lot of different stuff, including losing and gaining a ton of weight a lot of the off seasons that he was in Green Bay. He was a better player than most people give him credit for, and especially considering the fact that, you start picking there in the low 20s, it's harder to find difference makers, although you did just mention DeAndre Hopkins on the offensive side of the ball. The Packers were obviously in a stretch of trying to improve their defense, and it's hard for me to really kill them for the Dayton Jones pick. But I understand what you're saying, and I think, when you're talking about draft, how you want to set up your draft and how you're trying to attack it, most GMs, not every GM, but most GMs are not going to sit there and say, okay, here we're going to do best player available and here we're going to do need. You want to, like I said, you have a tier system of, these are your blue chip players and these are your role players and here are your longtime starters and here are your guys who are going to help you, who are maybe edge of the roster, practice squad guys, etc. You tier that out, and then you get to the draft and things are fluid, and you try and go by those tiers. You try and think, okay, if there's a blue chip player still on the board when we're drafting at 30, then you want to take that guy because that's how you build a overall really good football team rather than reaching for need. But I don't think any GM worth his salt is sitting there going, okay, this pick I have to be best player available, and here it has to be need. I just think anytime you're regimenting yourself like that, you're the potential for missing out on something is too good. First of all, thanks for what you and Corey do at Cheesehead TV. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for saying so. Why is there so much momentum in the media for the Packers to land Earl Thomas? The man just moved his family to Texas, for Pete's sake. He's going to be a Cowboy next year for sure. Well, Josh, I don't know if there's momentum in the media, although I did see my buddy Mike over there at PFF put Earl Thomas over on the Packers in his latest free agency exercise. But look, a lot of that doesn't mean anything. It's connecting names to teams. There's no inside information there. There's just people looking at fit and scheme and coaching and saying, oh, this guy might work here, etc. And it generates stuff. It generates conversation like online and here in this fine chat. But ultimately, none of that means anything. As you state, I think the writing's been on the wall. Thomas heading to Dallas for a long time, and that's why I haven't really entertained it. But, it's February, and they don't play an actual game until September. So you got to fill that time somehow, right? Earl Thomas to Green Bay is one way to do that. So they really keep Nick Perry on the roster this year or draft edge at 12? Seems his money could be spent on getting a safety plus signing Kenny Clark long term. Well, Alonzo, I don't think, whether Nick Perry is there or not is not going to determine whether they go, all in on an edge rusher at 12. Again, I think it's much more about who is the best player on their board at the time. And if it is an edge rusher far and away, then yeah, they'll take him. But will they keep Nick Perry? I think there's a very good chance they cut him. Like I said earlier in the chat, I think we'll start to hear some news on a lot of that starting next week during the Combine. But, it could go either way with Perry. Simply because if you're expecting to let Clay Matthews walk, and then you turn around and you cut Nick Perry, you're suddenly very, very thin at outside linebacker. And I understand you want to get better, you want to sign from free agents and draft a guy, and et cetera. But, man, you signed him, he's still under contract, and it's still a decent-sized penalty if you cut him. I think, they could cut him. But I understand the desire to move on from especially the tape that we saw earlier last year, because it was unimpressive, to say the least. And as far as Kenny Clark long term, don't forget he's entering the last year of his deal. He's got the 5th-year option waiting for him from the team. And I think, again, we'll get news of that probably during the Combine. Let's head back to the live chat here. Chris says, I really liked Hackett in his presser. Chris, I did too. You got to love his energy, love his enthusiasm for being a Green Bay Packer. That was the thing that I really liked. But, it was a fun display, especially when he was asked about his time in Jacksonville and how he really was appreciative, even though that was a man who was completely scapegoated. He had nothing bad to say about the Jaguars. I think that's the kind of guy you want in your building, definitely. Like and subscribe. Thank you. Yes, like and subscribe here on YouTube. Darn it. People, tell your friends. Tell them to like and subscribe. Why is it so hard to hear the questions when Packers have press conferences? So frustrating. Well, John, there's been a long history of me battling with Packers PR and digital about this subject. It's better than it used to be. At least now they have that mic, that field mic sitting in the front so you can kind of hear it. But man, I don't know. They just, I guess they don't want to pony up the money to make it really pro in the media auditorium. Andy Isabella in the 3rd round would be fired. DeMario, I would love to see him on the Packers. But you're looking at him, you look at the types of players they draft at wide receiver, and he is on the smaller side. He's the kind of player we've wanted to see in Green Bay for a long time, whether it's a twitch guy in the backfield as a 3rd down back, so to speak, or at wide receiver as one of those smaller, shifty speed guys that can, do damage in the open field like he can. I mean, I've been begging him to do this for the longest time, but since Ron Wolf has been there, they have really shied away from that type of receiver. They like those big guys, traditional West Coast guys who can muscle through things on the slants and the smashes and can be powerful at the catch point and be rugged in the elements, etc. For whatever reason, they've really, maybe the changing nature of the game, especially with the things going so far to the offensive side of the ball, especially, allowing wide receivers to operate in space, defenders not basically afraid to hit guys over the middle now for fear of fines and penalties. Maybe that starts changing their thinking in that regard. But historically, from Ron Wolf through Mike Sherman to Ted Thompson, they have liked bigger wide receivers. If Jonah Williams is there at 12, grab him. I would in a heartbeat. I mean, obviously, a lot depends on who else is available, how's the board, etc. But man, would I like him at 12? Absolutely. We need to draft a tight end. Zach, preach. Been saying it for years. Corey Banke went on a rant about it on Transplants 3 years ago. All these free agent rentals are getting tiring. Grow your own. You know, for a team that's been all about draft and develop for a decade plus, to not have, drafted a significant athlete at tight end since basically Jermichael Finley was on the squad, it's just crazy. And don't come up in here with Richard Rodgers because I'll nuke you. Nags, do you think the NBA is becoming more popular than the NFL, not just because of the game itself, but the drama and gossip that goes with it? Julian, the gossip and drama that goes around the NBA is the entire thing that drives it, especially online. And it feels like it gets talked about more. They play more games. There's a lot more traffic because of that. Online, you see a lot more chatter. I know the All-Star game just happened, and people are all in love with it, especially that Giannis dunk, which is dope. The whole, the kind of ecosphere around the NBA is huge. Do I think it's getting more popular than the NFL? No, not anytime soon. You just got to look at viewing numbers and revenue and all that. And yeah, no, it won't overtake it anytime soon. Could it eventually? Sure. Yeah, things are cyclical, and that could happen. But yeah, no. Yeah, no one's taking down the king anytime soon. Hawkinson fits Lafleur's system perfectly. Oh, man, I can't tell you how much I have dreamt about Hawkinson in a Packers uniform. Please. Thank you. Who is the best rangy safety in this year's free agency or draft? Woo, that's a large question. Rangy safety. Let me talk to some draft gurus and I'll get back to you on that. Free agency, I want Landon Collins, and he doesn't really fit the bill as a rangy safety, but I think he's rangy enough, and he can hit, and he can cover ground, and he arrives with a bad attitude. Collins is the guy I want in free agency. Giannis, whatever. You'll be okay if the Packers guy says a guy's name wrong in the NBA. You'll be okay. Whoa, Michael, whoa. Trade for OBJ, sign Le'Veon, draft Hawkinson. All right, 2 of those I'm down with. Don't sign Le'Veon. I wonder how much better our D could be if our offense could stay on the field. Brad, I'll tell you what, there's something to that. And I know there's, fine, you can bring all the problems on defense and lay them out on tape, and I understand all that, but there is definitely something to the idea that the Packers' defense has been hung out to dry on numerous occasions in games where they have basically gone toe-to-toe with the opponent until late in the third, early fourth quarter when fatigue sets in. You have seen that a number of times, especially over the last 2 or 3 years. I definitely agree. Some more efficiency on offense, extending drives, converting third downs, that will go maybe not a long way, but I think it definitely helps and it definitely supports your defense. And look, that's complementary football, right? And that's what you want to see. So, yeah, I think there's something to it. I don't think that's the be-all, end-all. I don't think that's the key, the answer, whatever. But there's definitely something there. Nags, we could all say Kabir Bajwa-Bielmilla's name. Yeah, that's football. That's important. Our defense would be top 10 if they just knew how to tackle. Whoo! Who are your top players you like at 12? Top 5 players I like at 12? I don't really have an order. I want Hawkinson. Polite, I would like to see. God, I don't know. He probably won't be there. They probably won't take him at 12 now because of the injury, or the surgery. But that Oklahoma wide receiver, that'd be fun. And I know that'd probably freak Packers fans out, but I love that. Do you see the offense improving? Yes. Do you think we should go back to drafting second-round wide receivers every year? I don't think it has to be a hard and fast rule, but I do think Ted Thompson did a fantastic job of doing it. I think it's always smart to kind of replenish the squad, so to speak. I think one of the reasons Ted Thompson was constantly supplying Mike McCarthy with wide receivers is because they used a lot of wide receivers. When they were running 4 or 5 wide back in the day, they needed talent on the field, and they always had a pipeline of new talent to supply Mike. And people would make fun of the Packers having so many wide receivers, but when you're running 4 or 5 wide receiver sets, you got to practice that stuff, and in practice, you need a bunch of bodies that play wide receiver. So as far as like hard and fast rule, got to take a wide receiver in the second round, no. Is wide receiver a priority? Here we go. Lafleur ran 60% of his plays in 2 wide receiver sets last year. Yes, who were his wide receivers? Who was his quarterback? And what was he trying to accomplish? More than anything, the thing that I'm most excited about for Lafleur is his stated goal of designing his offense around the personnel, not trying to hammer in his scheme with players that aren't fits for what he's trying to do. I think if he's got the talent, they can go as multiple as they want. And I don't know that you ever want to say, oh, look at this amazing prospect here. He's a once-in-a-lifetime talent. But you know what? Wide receiver really isn't a concern. I think that's how teams get mediocre. Do you think Aaron Jones can be a workhorse back? Love his game, but has been injured his first 2 years. Michael, that's a really good question. And I think it gets dismissed a lot by people who love his talent, and I understand that. He's exciting when he's on the field. Mike McCarthy took a lot of grief for his platoon system, and I understand why, because you want to get Aaron Jones on the field. But the guy has been injured 3 times in the last 16 months. 2 knee injuries and a hamstring injury that have kept him out for significant amounts of time. Makes you think maybe he does need to be part of a platoon. Now, should he be the lead guy? Should he be getting the majority of the carries? Probably. He's the most talented back on the roster. There's no question there. But am I concerned about using him 80, 90% of the time? Absolutely. And I don't think bringing in another running back, probably later in the draft or maybe in free agency and or undrafted free agency, is the world's worst idea. The NFL season is long and your body takes a lot of pounding. And so far, Jones hasn't shown that he's up to the task of playing 16 plus games without getting nicked up a little bit. Your opinion on trading for anyone, i.e. Brown or Bell? Well, I don't think Bell needs to be traded for. I think he'll hit the market. Brown, I don't love the fit. OBJ, I'd be down for it. Oh man, that's hard to read, David. Vonnie Holiday or Randy Moss. Ouch. Polite at 12, Adderley at 30, and Irv Smith Jr. in the second would be great. I'd be down with that. I'm totally down with that. Do we need to upgrade the right side of the offensive line? Bulaga has become an injury risk. Become an injury risk? The man is a walking injury. The Packers know that. It's undoubtedly why they asked him to take a pay cut last summer. But I think right guard is the bigger issue. I don't think it's the world's worst idea to upgrade there. I do think you got to be looking to the future, and I don't for a second think they won't be looking at tackles in this draft with an eye on developing somebody to take over for Bulaga after this season is over. But I think Bulaga will play out the last year of his deal in Green Bay, most likely. Now, maybe something comes to a head contract-wise and they cut him. Maybe they once again approach him about taking a pay cut and decide that they want to move on. But right now, I would expect him to play the last year of his deal at right tackle. And look, is he injured a lot? Yes. When he's on the field, he's one of the best in the business, especially in pass pro. It's not like you can just find those guys, pluck them away, and just throw somebody else, another body in there. I think he gets taken for granted a little bit because he does miss time. People get frustrated with the injuries, but when he's on the field, he's pretty damn good. All right, everybody, I'm going to have to jump. Thank you so much for all your questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to yours. I will be back tomorrow, not Monday, Wednesday this week, because I am leaving for Minneapolis on Wednesday. So I will be back here live tomorrow at 5 p.m. Prepare yourselves. Like, subscribe, as the gentleman said in the comments and chat. Thanks so much. Make sure you check out all our stuff at cheeseheadtv.com. Please consider becoming a patron of our Patreon page. It's $5 a month to support everything we do, including Naglers Never Right, my exclusive podcast there at the Patreon page. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great night.